And then tomorrow, Sunday, 84 degrees as a high, 64 degrees as a low, partly cloudy. On Monday, 79 degrees as a high, 63 degrees as a low, cloudy. Then Tuesday, 79 degrees as a high, 61 degrees as a low, partly cloudy. And then on Wednesday, that great day known as my birthday, the 17th of August, 81 degrees as a high, 62 degrees as a low, and we can expect some PM showers. Well, that is the weather brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. As I always tell folks, dress and whatever you need to do accordingly based on what the weather, because as I said, the weather was brutal here the last week and a half or so, the last couple of weeks, and it really kind of cooled off over the last day or so, and I am grateful and thankful for that because, as I said, it was brutal. So, all right, like I said, my guest is here waiting in the wings. I just need to make sure, as always, that my recording equipment is working because I do archive the shows so that folks who do not rise early, like me and my guest, and both of us are sticklers on time. We had a wonderful little chat, as we always do, with my guest 5 minutes or so before we go on the air. And I told you all before, I had a very good friend who's passed away now in terms of time that says, and he was one of the most on-time people I knew, and I asked him about it, and he says, his response was, why have a time if you're not going to be on it? And that has always stuck with me. And not to mention, Michael and I were talking about, Dr. Adams and I were talking about, both of us were in the military. And trust me, if you're in the military, you get a real good appreciation for being where you need to be on time. So he called in exactly at the time that I emailed him, which was 6:55 a.m. 6:55 a.m. The phone lit up and Dr. Adams was on the air. So I'm going to go ahead and check my recording equipment, and then I'm going to get him introduced, and we will be underway because we're going to talk about his work. His latest work is Make America Sane Again, but we'll talk about his other works also. But we're going to work our way up to Make America Sane, S-A-N-E, again. So let's see how this is going. It looks like, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So with that being said, my guest this morning is Dr. Michael Adams. Michael Adams received his Ph.D. in clinical psychology from the University of Miami after completing a pre-doctoral fellowship at Yale University. He was appointed as an Adjunct Assistant Professor at both the University of Miami and Nova Southeastern University, where he lectured worldwide. He has served as a captain in the Medical Corps, U.S. Army Reserve. All right. Dr. Adams specializes in relationship issues and has practiced for over 40 years. He is an expert psychological commentator and has participated in over 300 radio, print, and TV interviews. His first book, Affairs of the Net, published by HCI Books in 1996, representing a cutting-edge online relationship study. In addition, Dr. Adams has appeared on multiple national media outlets in recognition of his expertise in this area. Dr. Adams' first novel, Anniversary, published in 1998, is an inspirational story and represents HCI Books' first fiction-based book in over 25 years of publishing. The book was translated and released in Japan, Poland, and Hungary. His novel, God's Shrink, was published by HCI Books in 2007 and was met with critical acclaim. The book was translated and released in Japan, where it achieved bestseller status. It was also released in Poland, Portugal, and Brazil. In addition, he co-authored the screenplay, which is in development. Dr. Adams also hosted a weekly national public radio show, On the Couch, which featured interviews with various nationally recognized leaders in literature, the arts, entertainment, politics, and the media. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphone, none other than Dr. Michael Adams. Dr. Adams, good morning. All right, let's see now. Don't tell me this. Don't tell me. Let's see what's going on now in terms of good morning. There we go. Are you there?
Good morning.
There we go. Gotcha. All right. Every now and then a button is not lit that I don't see because, working this board is like flying an aircraft. It's just buttons and knobs and lights all over the place. So every now and again, you do radio, so every now and again one is not lit. So I'm sitting there do this grand introduction and then say good morning. It's dead silence because I don't have a button hit. But
that's funny.
Welcome to the show. And
Mark, thank you for having me on.
Well, and where are you calling out of? Are you calling out of Florida?
Yes, I'm out of down South Florida, about 20 miles north of Boca Raton, Florida.
Oh, and I've been to Boca Raton years ago. I was down there in Boca Raton for a week. I was down there on a work conference, and we had it in Boca Raton. And beautiful area. And I remember it well because we went out on a boat, we went out on a yacht, and I actually wound up getting seasick while we were out there on the yacht. Yes.
well, that's because you're a former Air National Guard guy. You don't use the water.
That's right.
That's your excuse, Mark, and you should stick to that excuse.
That's exactly what I'm going to stick to. Well, I am glad to have you on the show because as I was telling you, as we were chatting, before we went on the air, that your latest book, not to say the other ones weren't, but this latest one is so timely in terms of you're spot on of why I was reading why you wrote it in the introduction as you were chatting with your colleagues. But it is spot on in terms of kind of like where we are as a country, maybe even as a world, because you heard me talk about my birthday is going to be Wednesday. I'll be 60 years old. And I can honestly say, Dr. Adams, in the 60 years that I've been here, I have not seen us where we are at this point.
Well, Mark, you're 100% right. I wrote this book, a little bit quick backstory. I've spent about 90,000 hours in face-to-face work with people. That's a lot of time, right? Over the years. And I've dealt with all kinds of issues that people have as a psychologist, right? Depression, anxiety, addictions, loss, you name it. But in the last few years, since the pandemic came to us, inflation, a more recent thing, and of course our political divide, I got to the point where it's, something, we need a little bit of common sense now. We desperately need common sense. So the book is themed around all that, Mark. It's not about graphs and figures. The title, Make America Sane Again, is an effort, an appeal to people to start to try to engage with common sense and, most importantly, tolerance, because we've become a very intolerant society, don't you think?
I could not agree with you more. And that's what I mean in terms of and this is like in just about every facet. It doesn't matter whether it's politics, education, service industry. I mean, you name it. It's kind of like you said, inflation. It's just so many things coming at people all at once that I can get why people are losing it mentally. But at the same time, everybody's not. And there has to be some, like you said, at some point coming to some common sense. And that's what I was saying earlier. I was sharing the podcast with you about this whole customer service experience. I was in the store the other day, and it was an elderly gentleman. He yelled out, and I could have went over there and hugged him because he yelled out in the store, "Why can't we just pay with a cashier as we've always done?" And he went on, and apparently he was a veteran as well, because he went on to say that he wanted to be able to use his veteran discount, so forth and so on. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to do that at the self-scan. But it's this type of you could feel the tension and the frustration as you move about.
Yes, it's palatable. And I'm glad you just brought that up because, we have a problem, obviously, in America with violence as well, right? But psychologically, I'd like your audience to understand this, that for people to be aggressive, right, they have to have pent-up frustration first. And if you look around, of course, we have a lot of frustrating situations going on, right? But that frustration can boil over into aggression. Now, that aggression could be anything from verbal, physical, and otherwise, and God forbid, completely violent, as we know through shootings, right? But in order for a person to be aggressive, to yell out, to be upset, whatever, they have to be frustrated first. So where's all this frustration coming from? Well, obviously, we have major issues in this country, but I will tell you, Mark, the very first chapter of my book is called Stop Feeding the Elephant. The elephant in the room is the negative media, and I take that head on because when I grew up, I'm a little bit older than you, but the news was like 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and there was a newspaper, and that's about it. And now we got a 24/7 news cycle in all mediums, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff is not necessarily news, it's opinion and propaganda. And the problem with that is when people listen to that over and over and over and over again, Mark, they become depressed, they become anxious, they become worried. So I tell people, listen, news is okay, but take it in small doses because beyond that, it's just going to amp you up.
Again, spot on. And to my point, at one point, I would watch the news every night. But since last August, I think I've watched the news maybe 3 times because I literally tuned it out. Every now and again, I'll see what's going on in current events. I'll see on something on social media, on Twitter or whatever. That kind of keeps me up. But in terms of, you're right, if you're inundated over and over and over again, and as you said, when we were kids, like you said, it was 6 o'clock news. We watched Walter Cronkite or,
Exactly.
Any of those the folks that, are famous news commentators during that time period. But now, like you said, you're hit, whether it's on your tablet, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on the television, through social media channels, through television or what have you. And it's constant. You're being barraged with just constant. Matter of fact, I'm to the point now where I don't know if the things that we're constantly being hit with were always there and we just didn't have the mediums to see so much of it, or if it's really increased.
I think it's increased because I think the segue has gone from news, hard copy news, right, to opinion and spin and sound bites. So don't forget, look, the news agencies are businesses, right? They make money off of advertising and, and viewership and whatever, readership, right? And the thing is, they got to keep people engaged. So how do they keep people engaged? Let me tell you, psychologically, just make them scared.
Wow.
Just make them scared. If you make them scared and fearful, they'll be engaged because human nature is we pay attention to something that seems to be threatening us. So I would submit to you that we're seeing a lot of opinion out there and not as much news. And the problem with that is it just feeds into the polarization. I don't know what your experience is, Mark, but even in my practice, people are so polarized. They're either, especially politically, right? They're for one person or the other person, like 110%, and they all view the other side as a disaster.
Correct.
So there's very few people that see both sides of the coin. Very few.
So
that's the problem.
No, you're absolutely right. So what does that do, based on what you just described about constantly being put into fear? What does that do to the psyche?
What it does to the psyche, interestingly enough, thanks for asking that question. What ends up in the psyche is it leads to something in psychology we call learned helplessness of depression. What does that mean? It means when you feel like you're facing issues that you can't control and do a darn thing about, you feel helpless. And if you feel helpless and you have no hope, that leads to depression. And it leads to anxiety, right? So the thing we have to remember, and this is really important, it affects the psyche, but it also affects the body. What happens with stress over time is it suppresses your immune system. Most people don't quite understand that thoroughly enough. When your immune system gets suppressed, guess what? You're open to a lot of diseases, illnesses, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we have to be super careful about our exposure, and especially to anything that produces fear inside of us, because that will suppress our immune system, and that will surely make us sick over the long run. And that's an issue. So I like what you're doing, which is what you're doing is what your audience should do, which is, pay attention to the news, tune in, find out what's going on. You want to be informed, but be careful. I always call it the news diet.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy in terms of a diet. Like you just, because literally, I can remember, and especially and I'll say it was CNN, where if you watched each show, they said absolutely the same, whether if it was Anderson, whether if it was Don, whether if it was any of them. If you sit there and watch the shows one after the other, they're reporting the exact same story. And as you said, giving their spin on it. So you could just sit there, right? So you can just sit there and just take that in over and over and over again. And like you said, you could get to the point where you just want to throw up your hands and say, forget it. And so how does all this, because when you start talking depression, how does that feed into bipolar or borderline personality disorder or narcissism, or which kind of comes first? Do they come first, or are they just part of, or as a result of depression, it starts spinning off into those?
Well, that's an excellent question. So whether it's a personality disorder, bipolar, addictive personality, depressive personality, anxious personality, those are basically precursors. So what I'm saying is those are your baseline issues that probably already exist, okay? They get exacerbated, though, through all the stress. They get worsened through all the stress. So you've got a baseline where you have this issue to begin with, but now it gets amped up because of some of the factors we've been discussing. It gets worse, if you will. So it could set off a person with bipolar. It could set off a person with a proclivity to depression or anxiety, or make addictions worse. We've seen a spike in addictions during COVID, right? So and I'd love to get to this topic if we have time, which is the fentanyl epidemic. It's covered in my book. But, we're really dealing with situations where your baseline difficulties are being made worse. And so, once again, I can't say this enough, just people have to be smart consumers of information, not just products, right?
Correct.
So,
and how much...
keep them more sane.
And it's interesting because I, like you, have observed that, and not to mention we were a part of it, that pandemic in terms of being isolated, not being able to go about your regular routine, not being able to really hug and communicate with people the way that we normally would, the 6 feet apart, the wearing of masks, all of that had to play a role in some of this as well. Huge.
Thank you. I cover this in the book. I talk about the fact that I call loneliness the silent killer.
Yes.
Why is that? Because loneliness leads to the withdrawal of life. It suppresses the immune system, leads to depression, stress, anxiety. You're 100% right. Humans. Now, here's the interesting paradox. With the pandemic, we were told keep your distance from people. People are dangerous to you, possibly, right, because of the virus. But it's antithetical to psychology. I'll tell you why. Because when we're fearful, and Americans are very independent, of course, but when we're very fearful, look at 9/11. People pull together.
Correct.
We were told to do just the opposite.
Correct.
Stay away from people. Don't touch people. Put a mask on. All that kind of stuff, right? Now, that's been so detrimental to people because, again, that isolation just made people worse off, not better off, much worse off. And you can make the argument one way or the other. Was it necessary, not necessary? Irrespective of that, it's done enormous damage to people. And you mentioned it real quickly. This is very important, Mark. A hug. What about a hug? People couldn't even hug each other anymore.
Correct.
It's weird, right? It's really weird. It's antithetical to our normal way of being.
No, it really is because, and my listening audience, they hear it every week and they already know it, but my day job, actually I'm a principal of a school, and I cannot tell you the devastation that did in terms of student interaction, teacher-student interaction, everything. I mean, we came back partially this past year. We were in and out, but each time we would have to reacclimate. We would have to acclimate ourselves back to being in person and live again. And the damage that it did in terms of our kids, because, not only are adults social, kids are social too. They miss their friends. They miss going out to play. They miss coming to school. And so certainly exactly what you were talking about just now is spot on in terms of what it did to us over these last couple of years of having to be isolated. I've had family members myself that were victims of depression. And it obliterated some things within the family. It really did. I have a sister, she's in the hospital right now, and part of it is suffering from depression. Other family issues going on as well, and it all came about during this pandemic time.
Yes, it affects people very, very profoundly. I'll tell you quickly an anecdote from my practice. I have a practice in Boca Raton, and probably 70 to 80% during the pandemic still saw me in person, Mark. Now, a lot of my colleagues just went to Zoom and all that kind of stuff. I was like, guess what? If you're comfortable enough, you want me to wear a mask, you wear a mask, whatever. From day one, I said, it's your comfort level, but my office is open. And 80% said, I'm on board with that. They come in, sit like 7 feet apart from me, mask on, mask not on. But that interaction, that presence itself is so healing and so important to us. And you see it as a principal, like you said. You see it with the students. You see it with the teachers. Developmentally, these kids are going to have, especially the younger ones, they're going to have a lot of trouble, adjusting to this new norm. And then I'll quickly insert this. Don't forget that online teaching is never as good as in person.
Correct.
I don't care what anybody says. I don't
Correct.
care what anybody says. You know that.
Listen, I saw in the bios I was reading just now about being an adjunct professor. I was an adjunct as well, and one semester I had to teach that. I hated it. I love the personal interaction. I love being up in front of the class. I love being able to walk through the aisles and chat with students and talk with students. I hated working on the blackboard and doing the online class. I really did. The personal interaction is key. Even like I said with the kids, it meant so much when we finally did get back, and we just dropped the mask requirement back in May. But it made so much of a difference for teachers and students to be able to hug. That's why I brought up the hug, because,
absolutely.
You had teachers almost in tears at the fact that they finally could hug a student.
You know, and the other thing is, now here's an interesting rub, too, as kids are going back to school, right? Here's another issue that I cover in the book, which is, you know, kids are addicted to the Internet now, social media,
right,
gaming, unbelievable. Now, you're a principal, so you probably know this. A lot of the students are addicted to video games, right? So
correct.
That's going to be a real challenge because parents are going to have to be like, guess what? You can't play till 2 o'clock in the morning. You actually have some homework to do. Do you know that you know something, Mark? I got kids in my practice that do, you ready for this? 40 to 50 hours a week on video games.
I am not surprised, and I'm laughing.
That's a job with overtime.
It is. I'm not surprised because on Wednesday evening, I did a parent workshop, and one of the points that I pointed out was exactly what you just said. You cannot allow your child to be on video games till 2 or 3 in the morning. You cannot allow that. And
it's a problem. And I'll tell you, let's go one step further. I coined a term in the book, Mark. It's called social anorexia. Now, what does that mean?
That's right.
It means that these kids will grow up with not proper social skills. A lot of them will, but a lot of them won't. And so it's going to be an awkward time for people moving forward in the sense that these kids will never have developed interpersonal communication skills that are necessary to be successful in this life. You know, before the show went on, you said to me, hey, we're going to have a conversational style. And I said to you, perfect. That's perfect for me. That's an art that is, honestly, I'm going to see with young people. I hope we don't lose that art because it is an art to be able to just converse normally. And they're going to have problems with it.
You're correct. Because just, again, my observation is with the children that I serve, they don't even know how to play. I mean, in terms of playing for them is hitting. They wind up in my office like, well, you know, how did this start? Oh, we were just playing. I said, but that's not play. And you knock somebody's eye out. That's not play.
Oh, right.
So they don't even know how to play. So I'm looking at the book, the chapters in the book, and we certainly can talk about your previous works as well if you want to work those into the conversation. But I know this particular book, Make America Sane Again, was just released. And again, it couldn't be more timely. And I'm looking at the... Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I'm getting ready to read the chapter titles, but go ahead.
I was just going to say real quickly, too, because I want people to understand this. People kind of joked at me when I said I was going to write this book, Mark. They said, come on, really? How many volumes is that? And the other one was good luck with that.
Right.
But here's the secret sauce. Here's the secret sauce. We as individuals can't make America sane again, but we as individuals can empower ourselves to make ourselves sane again.
Correct.
And just as fear is contagious, guess what? So is positivity and optimism. So I challenge the readers. I dedicate the book to the reader. I said, listen, you know, try to be hopeful about America, but you yourself as a person, try to pull it together, follow some of the things I'm suggesting, and be a person who spreads positive energy. This is the most important thing you can do to heal America. Just be yourself as a positive human being. The story. That's
absolutely, because one of the chapter titles is accepting personal responsibility. And the same thing like getting off the blame train, because that's what we do. We sit there and everybody's pointing their finger at the other. And nobody's really, at least in my view, and myself included, we don't just self-assess and say, okay, what is my role in this? What role am I playing in this, and what role can I play, as you say, in the solution? And see, that positivity piece is big, because I'm big into mindfulness, I'm big into affirmations, so forth. And a lot of people think those things are a bunch of hooey. I'm not one of those that subscribe to that. I mean, I try to be, I'm not even allowed to try, I'm as positive as possible. That's why it's even hard for me, and I said that in the podcast, saying, you know, I'm not a pessimist. Trust me on that. I am not a pessimist at all.
Oh, I can tell.
And again, in terms of, you know, but based on what we're observing, but we do need to understand we do play a role in this as well. And unfortunately, too many of us are not willing to admit that we play a role as well. So that's why I like what you just said, that, well, you know what, maybe we can't make Americans, but if each one of us, because this is the deal, if each one of us work on making our own self sane again, ultimately America will become sane again.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's the key right there. You know, I have it in the chapter, I ask people to suspend reality for a second and just do an exercise. And here's the exercise. I say, hey, imagine America is like a human body with cells, and you're a cell in that body. Now, what kind of cell do you want to be? An inflammatory cell, which creates more inflammation in the body of America, or do you want to be a T killer cell, which is something that responds to an illness or an invasion of the body, which helps to what? Heal it. So be a T cell. Be a T cell. Don't be an inflammatory cell. We got enough of those around.
It makes there's this app. It's called Long Walks, and it's a cute little app. Every day it asks you a bunch of random questions that you take a few minutes as a part of mindfulness to kind of think about and answer to. And one of the questions for one of the days said something along the lines of, what would make your day, or this, that, and the other, or what is it that really brings you joy, whatever. And so my response to that was just seeing somebody smile. I mean, just to see or to receive or smile. I was, doing the whole thing about customer service, but just to come up on a cashier when you're paying and they smile at you or you smile at them. Because, there's that old adage, if you want to have friends, be a friend. If you want to, I'm paraphrasing, but in order to have friends or you want people to be friendly, you have to be friendly. Back to your point, why don't we be the ones who initiate the kind word? Or why don't we be the ones to initiate the smile? And interestingly enough, when you smile, what I found is when I go up to the cashier or the cash register or the service pro there and I smile and conversate, as you said, it comes back. They look and smile back.
Absolutely. It's funny you should say that. When I check out the supermarket where we are, they all have name tags, right? So I'll say when the guy's bagging the bag or the woman is, running the register, whatever, I'll say, hey, thanks, Mary. Thanks, Keith. Have a great day. Does that hurt me? No. But it personalizes them. They have a name.
Correct.
And they need to hear it. Hey, thanks for bagging my bag, man. I appreciate that. They need to hear that. They need to be acknowledged as a human being, not a moving part in the machine.
Correct. And interesting, I just had that experience yesterday. It was on the telephone. I was talking with the company, and the young man picked up, and he said his name was Joshua. And I heard the Josh part, but I wasn't sure if he said Joshua or Josh. I said, okay, did you say Joshua or Josh? He said, I prefer to be called Joshua. It's like, great, Joshua, this is my issue. From that point on, Joshua had no problem helping me. And then the next young lady that he transferred me to, her name was Kim. Kim and I had a wonderful conversation. But that's why even this morning, if you remember, I said, how would you like to be addressed? Because I'm a pet peeve on names. Would you like to be Dr. Adams? Would you like to be Michael Howard? However you want to be addressed, that's how I'm going to address you. But it makes such a difference.
Huge difference. And it's these little things that can go a long way, can't they, Mark?
Yes, they can.
They really can. They really can. So, again, the overarching message is, you be the change you want to see. You be the change you want to see out there.
Yes.
You be that person. You be that role model for other people, especially for young people. Be that role model. Be that kind person. Be that caring person. Being that understanding person, that tolerant person. And I strongly believe that those are values that need to be transgenerational. And I think that's, you and I are both in our 60s. So we've kind of had the benefit in some ways of growing up in some ways a challenge in America, that.
Right.
But also some good values. And my concern is what are happening to these values of tolerance and faith and belief. And okay, I'll go on the edge right now, believing in God.
Correct. No, this show, that's fine. You're not on the edge on this show, because like I said, I'm between the author interviews. Like I said earlier, the gospel music is being played, and we do talk about God and during the 3 hours I'm on the air. So you're not on the edge on this one.
No, that's great. And I'll tell you real quickly, if you don't mind me segueing really fast. You asked me about my other work. I think you'd find, as a deacon, you'd find this interesting. My last book was called God's Shrink.
Correct.
And God's Shrink was basically a book. It's a fiction book, but it's a book about a gentleman who walks into a psychiatrist's office and claims he's God. Psychiatrist thinks he's crazy, except he's not. He's the real deal. So he gets therapy for himself for 10 sessions, but it's very revealing. In other words, he points out what's wrong with the world and what we need to do to fix it. So the psychiatrist over time is like, holy cow, this is the real deal here? And so it's kind of entertaining and informative at the same time. It's a fun book.
That's the best kind. Because as you know, storytelling is what gets the message across sometimes better than if we just, as you said, give the numbers or charts and slides or whatever. We can tell it in a story form and have a redemptive message. That will get the point across. Now I'm going to have to download that because I already downloaded Make It Sane Again, but I'll have to download that one now because you piqued my curiosity on that.
Well, good. Now, hey, Hey, man, I think I'm batting 1,000 this morning. You know? Wow. Keep it coming, Mark. Keep it coming, Mark. I'm like, you're making me feel good this morning.
Well, that's part of the objective of the show in terms of I do really have an objective of making my guests feel welcome while we're on the air. That's why it's conversational, because it's like I don't necessarily like a question answer format unless ahead of time, whenever we're doing our, when we get together, that you say, I really want you to hit these points while we're on the air. Then I'll do that. But for the most part, it's just like we're doing right now. Because there's another thing that you said that was interesting when you talked about common sense. Now, there's again that phrase that common sense is not all that common. In other words, that does make sense, but not many of us practice it. And that's where I agree with you. Like, for so many things, and going back to what you said in terms of when we were being raised, there's so many things that seem like common sense has really gone out the window. I cannot tell you, Dr. Adams, how many times I sit there and look at something or listen to something and be like, I can't believe what I just heard or just saw based on it. Just like, I have to ask the question, does that make sense to you?
Well, it's really, really important because, it guides our way of going through the world, right? One of my favorite examples of like bewilderment is during the COVID pandemic, and I point this out in the book. Okay, some guy is pulling up to a traffic light in his motorcycle. That's cool. No helmet. That's his choice, right? But he's got a mask on. So I'm thinking to myself, that guy is more concerned about picking up a virus on the open air highway than he is about spilling his brains out on the sidewalk. That's pretty nutty.
See, again, that would be my operative. Does this make sense to you? I mean, I saw it the other day. A young lady had on a hoodie and shorts. Now, mind you, the weather was like almost 100 degrees. And she had on a hoodie with the hood on and a pair of shorts. And that was another one of those where I kind of looked, does that make sense to you? But it's like... You're absolutely right. You got on the mask, but you won't wear the helmet. Okay, all right. But that's the kind of things we're talking about. And then when you combine that with the lack of patience and the lack of tolerance and the high frustration, that's why we're getting all these aberrant acts.
Yes, we are. But, the thing about it is, too, is, I tell people, Mark, that one index of intelligence is the ability to understand 2 points of view at the same time. Now, think about that for a second, that you can take 2 points of view and understand both points of view. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with the other point of view. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means you understand it, or you understand elements of it. It's this polarization, this intolerance, where it's like you feel 100% sure of your position and 0% of the other position. That's
correct.
Intolerance. And that's not what America should be based on. We should have beliefs and differences, not like, oh, you believe this, like I hate you, or I hate that politician, or I hate this, hate that. Hate, in my vocabulary, is a very strong word.
Agreed.
It should be rarely experienced in life, hopefully, right? But
agreed.
That's the thing.
So in terms of one of the questions I usually do ask, though, because I know you're a psychologist, I know your Ph.D., and I know your line of work, but did you set out to be an author? Was your thoughts always in terms of writing books, or how did that come along? How did it come along that you have your practice and what you do, but now you're also an author?
Well, it started off by this way back in 1996, okay? A colleague and I wrote a book called Affairs of the Net. Just way back then, people were starting to meet online, and they were starting to have relationships online. This is back at the days of America Online had chat rooms back then. There were no dating,
right.
Internet dating services, zero. But we started to see people in our practice coming in saying, hey, I'm talking to somebody in California, and I'm here in Florida, and we're starting to create a relationship and become romantic, and I'm going to fly out there and see them. So I saw this phenomena taking place, and I thought, something, we need to look into this. This is going to be big. And we wrote a book, did really well, and it was really big. So that piqued my interest in writing. But I've dabbled between fiction and nonfiction. It's my passion. Honestly, I love to write. I love my clients and my practice, but I love to write. And I like to spread a positive message that makes me happy. And the mystery, right? I love the mystery of we're on the air right now, and I don't know who's listening to me right now.
Correct.
It's mysterious. It's mysterious to me. It's like they're listening to me in a car or in their home or lying in bed. But to me, those things are like magical. I think it's amazing. The work you're doing is great. You're spreading a positive message. I like to see how that affects people, and I'll never know sometimes, but to me, that's exciting.
I could not agree with you more. And now I'm going to see you batting more than 1,000, because now I'm going to have to download Affairs of the Net as well. I'm going to have all your books before it's over.
You're killing me, man. You're killing me.
So
hey,
now
I know you're a principal and a video host and you do all kinds of stuff, but do you want to be my PR person?
I tell you what, I might take you up on that, but
all right, man, I'm down with that. I'm in on it. I'm down with it.
I am now going to have to download Affairs of the Net, because now I'm interested in that topic as well. And then I see the other book is Anniversary, a love story. Because the other thing that's interesting is, okay, the Affairs of the Net and Anniversary, the love story, maybe I might connect them. But your books are, they're standalone. They're of their own, they're their topic.
They are standalone. Nothing is like a series, if you will, But I will tell you what's kind of exciting about Make America Sane Again is it's just got released, and I'm getting great feedback on it. And I just signed a contract with an international rights company, what does that mean? They go overseas, and they say, listen, they think this book has got traction in other countries through translation. Because they think, and this is interesting, Mark, the whole world is watching us. They said, listen,
exactly.
We think we can do well. The whole world is watching America. So, unfortunately, a lot of what's happening in this country gets exported not in a very flattering way, right?
Correct.
It doesn't look really good. We don't look really good around the world right now, which is
correct.
Which is sad.
No, it really is. And there was something else that you brought up a couple minutes ago about the mystery. You're absolutely, and I've never heard it put that way, but I love it. I have no idea how many listeners we have. And I know the number is because at one point the station was local. We only were heard in the New York, New Jersey area. And then years ago we went to streaming on the web, and anybody in the world can hear us. So there are folks listening to us on their phones, on their tablets, like you said, in the car, in the bed, walking around the house. There are folks listening to us on all types of platforms and mediums. And the other thing about a book, and I tell authors this all the time, this is the thing about a book. You really do have an opportunity to have a legacy there, because we'll be dead and gone and those books will still be around somewhere. Particularly the paper copy and the hard copies or whatever. If somebody purchased that, you never know when you're going to go up in somebody's attic or somebody's basement or in a trunk somewhere, whatever, and come across that book. I come across books now that I've had for like 30, 40 years. And so it's like, books will always be there. And once you have a book out there with your name on it, like I'm looking at Michael Adams, Ph.D. on all 4 of the books, at some point somebody's going to come across that book, and like I said, we'll be dead and gone, but that book is still here. So that's the mystery as well. So you have no idea who's reading it, you have no idea who's listening to the shows or whatever. I could not agree with you more.
Well, Mark, I would invite your listeners, if anybody decides to, get my book, what have you, at the very end, I always love this part, I invite readers. I said, listen, please let me know what you thought. I mean, personally, let me know what you thought. And they can go to my website and they can send me a note, a message, a thought, an opinion, whatever. And I always respond to people, because to me, it's exciting. It's like, oh, thank you for reading my book. What did you think? Okay, great. Let me give you a little bit of feedback. I love doing that. It's connecting with the readers. And that, to me, is also very exciting.
It really is, and because there's a couple of my listeners that attend my church, so each Sunday I get a debrief from them. They whenever I see them on Sunday mornings, they debrief me and they give me all kinds of feedback of what they heard, what they love, what they like, what they learned, so forth and so on. So you're right. That's exactly. I mean, the feedback is just as important as us putting it out there. Is folks saying, I heard this and I love that, or I didn't agree with that, or I agree with this. Like you said, to the point where and that is where we have to get to. Like, everybody doesn't have to agree on everything. But like you said, at least be able to see each other's point of view. Like, I can see why you might think that. I can see where you got this. But we just, like you said, we take this hardline stance. It's either one way or the other, my way or the highway. And that's why we keep getting into all this friction.
Well, and one of the last things I say in the book, it's kind of pointed, but I say, Mark, listen, now that you have, woken up from this mass hypnosis after reading this book, yes. That's what I call it, this mass hypnosis. What you need to do is take charge of your life and just move forward, be a good human being and blah, 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 all that good positive stuff. But I pointedly say this mass hypnosis because, Mark, on a deeper level, people's minds are being manipulated.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
They're being manipulated. So I always listen to people and I go, are they talking to me based on their own reflective thinking, or did this just sound like a soundbite?
Right.
And if it's a soundbite, I think they've been drinking the Kool-Aid too much. I want to hear what they think and how they assess things, because you're a principal. You know what I think the kids really need to learn is critical, analytical thinking skills.
Correct.
Right? Think for yourself.
Correct. That was the mantra of my parents. They signed, and I've said this on there before, they signed my yearbook with that. My high school yearbook, 1980. They signed it. Remember what me and your dad always told you, quote, think for yourself, unquote.
Perfect.
And that was like, as my sister and I were kids, that's what was drummed into us. Think for yourself. In other words, don't let the crowd think for. I mean, it was like, my parents were very clear. If you see a fight or something going on your way home from school, you better not stop by it. You better keep walking, go the other way. Don't get caught up in the crowd, because it's in the crowd when anything can happen. You can get wound up getting hurt or sucked into the fight or getting hit or whatever. Just do not be in the crowd. Think for yourself. And that was literally drummed into me and my sister. Like I said, they signed my yearbook with it. Remember what we always told you, quote, think for yourself. But you're absolutely right. The critical thinking piece, that's why, and you just said the word soundbite. Because I guess I could be called a conspiracy theorist to a degree, but I don't think it's so much as a conspiracy theorist as some stuff. Like I said, I asked that question again. Does that make sense to you? The way this is told to us, does that make sense to you as happening? Or because I personally think we're a soundbite country myself. We can tell us anything and we just keep rolling with it, and then we take it as gospel, take it as fact.
Well, a conspiracy is only a conspiracy if you think it is. The thing is, there's some conspiracies are facts, right?
Correct.
And so, conspiracies turn out to be like a dirty word. Oh, you're crazy if you think there's a conspiracy out there. No, you're not. You're putting some pieces together.
Correct.
And you're saying people have pulled together a model or a way of doing things behind closed doors, perhaps, or not, and they're going to approach something a certain way. Is that a conspiracy? Well, yeah, because people are putting their minds together with a certain objective that's not necessarily the truth or necessarily positive and might be contributing to our problems, right? But it's based on groupthink, people getting together, thinking the same way, and say, let's manipulate the situation this
Correct.
way or that way. That's what it is.
No, it really is.
Manipulated if you would let it.
It really is. And when you have a society that really, for the most part, for whatever reason, whether we don't have time to do it or we're under so many other pressures, that we really don't triangulate information. We don't do a lot of research, because I'm kind of like a researcher. Like, okay, I'm going to look at 2 or 3 different, like talking about open mind point of view. I'm going to look at a few different point of views before I finally make an assessment. We generally tend not to do that.
No, we don't. And, do your research, and people, sometimes look at that disparagingly, but no, do your research. The thing is, what's interesting about that, though, is you're not going to oftentimes get the entire picture from your mainline platforms.
Correct.
You have to dig a little deeper. You have to dig to, not the mainstream media stuff. You have to look at other sources.
Correct.
Hopefully you trust those other sources, and then you have to make up your own mind.
Correct. And therein lies the final piece. Make up your own mind. Don't just go with the flow. Don't just go with what you're told. Kind of like after putting all the piece parts together, then you kind of say, okay, this is what kind of, back to critical thinking again, this is what kind of makes the most sense to me based on everything that I know. I noticed during our conversation, you've done your homework on me. I heard you reference the fact that I was in the Air National Guard. I heard you reference the fact that I was a deacon. You didn't know that. I didn't tell you that. You looked that up. You found it out, whether it was on my website or whether it was on other social media platforms or whatever. You did your homework.
Yes. I want to know who I'm speaking to. And it doesn't take much in this day and age to search out information, right? But it also personalizes things. I mean,
Correct.
With you and I doing the interview today, it personalizes things a little bit. And I was teasing you before about you being in the Air National Guard and getting seasick, right? I mean,
right.
You have to connect to people on different levels. And that, again, that's part of the richness of the human experience. Mark, I don't believe in strangers. I don't believe in any strangers. I think it's a potential friend I haven't met yet. That's how I look at people. Like I recognize people as people who are people that maybe they could be a friend of mine, right? But right now, this gets a little into the spiritual God area. I just think we're all brothers and sisters.
Correct.
That's where I'm coming from.
I am too, and that's probably why we're connecting so well, because that's the same perspective I have. I really do not get into the whole race thing, the gender thing, the this, that, and the other. I see it the same way you do in terms of, well, my brother, that's my sister. We're all human beings. None of us should be trying to hurt the other.
Well, Mark, I got to tell you something. In Boca Raton, I work in a building that's got, I don't know, whatever, maybe 28 offices, a couple hundred employees, okay? But they represent every ethnic background, every race, every culture that you can imagine. We have a lot of representation from South America and that kind of stuff. But everybody's friendly. That's where I'm going with this. Everybody is friendly in that building. It doesn't matter what your background is or your race or your gender or this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter, or gay, this. It doesn't matter. Everybody's just nice to each other. And I look at that as the microcosm, and I say, I believe most people are actually good. I believe that.
Correct.
And there's some bad apples, bad actors, of course. But unfortunately, those are outlier scores who get a lot of attention. They really do. The more outrageous and crazy you are, the more attention you get, which is unfortunate.
Correct. And, kind of like that's going back to the Diary of Anne Frank. That's what she says all the time. Like, at the end of the day, people are really good. And they are. And I think, but what we're talking about this morning, whenever you combine depression, stress, fear, addiction, anger, anxiety, when all of that boils up, you do get what we're getting. And exactly what we're talking about is really the remedy if folks would kind of really get a really good understanding of when you start talking common sense, faith, and values. That's what all these things you have on the cover of the book. Dr. Adams, this is the thing for me. The same energy that it takes to be nasty is the same energy you can use to be kind.
Totally. It's energy put in a different direction, right? And the thing about it, is that it's not rocket science. I tell people this is not rocket science. My book is written in a very conversational, easy to understand style. It is on purpose because I don't want people to go through graphs and figures and stuff. I just want them to wrap their heads around some common sense notions that everybody can profit from. And that's the overarching goal. And to be, I know I'm repeating myself now, but it's about being tolerant and understanding and kind. And yes, it takes just as much energy to be kind as it does to be nasty. But I will say this. If somebody's proclivity is very nasty, they're very negative, they're very down, I do believe that we need to avoid that kind of energy.
Correct.
If they can't be turned for whatever reason, keep your distance, because that negative energy, even if you're trying to maintain positive energy, even optimists can be eroded.
Correct.
By negative energy.
That's absolutely right. And in terms of, I know there are cases where people will tell, look, you're going to have to love them from a distance. Exactly what you just said in terms of, yes, the negative or the pessimism will begin to erode the positivity and the optimism, and that you don't want. And it's interesting that I heard you say just now that the book is written easy. And so what I'm hearing from that, and listening to all, you need to understand, you heard me say that Michael or Dr. Adams is a Ph.D. It's not, and I've had a chance to skim the book, it's not in PhDEs. It is in everyday layman terms.
It is. That's how you want to reach people, so it's understandable. I want people to read the book, enjoy the book. I've got a bunch of personal experiences and anecdotes in there to make a point I'm making in the book, but also keep it flowing and interesting. Here's the secret of the book, though, I believe. I try to really get across these principles that I think people need to understand psychologically about what's going on in themselves emotionally and psychologically. It's actually common sense based, like I've said, right? But it's easy read, conversational. But if you take the deep dive and you think about the concepts I'm trying to get across to people, they'll understand that their own brains are pretty sophisticated and pretty complex. And I explain those things in kind of simple layman's terms, but so that people understand that, they don't have to be reactive. They can be responsive to life.
Correct.
That's one of the points,
I got a kick in the introduction, and we talked about it a couple of minutes ago, whenever your colleagues responded to the title. It says, when I responded with Make America Sane Again, they almost always politely smiled and said, good luck with that. So
they did.
I mean, were they coming from the fact that it's kind of like a play on "Make America Great Again," or was it just that they felt that it was?
No, for sure. Well, the thing is, when somebody reads my book, what they're going to find is it's not political. It's just not political.
Right.
It's not. I said, as a matter of fact, in the introduction, I said, don't waste your time trying to figure out where I'm coming from, because this is not a political book. This is a psychological book. And yes, it's a play on "Make America Great Again," but I thought it was kind of an interesting sort of like clever.
I did
clever
too.
Title.
I did too. When you're a PR person, whenever the publishing company, whenever they sent me the email and I read it, I said, that's why I immediately responded, I have to have him on the show because I love the title of the book. And you responded back so quickly, and I'll thank you for that. And that's why we made today happen. But I'm going back here again, back in the introduction. It says, and we've been talking about it, pessimism has taken a deep hold on America. And that's where I was going in the beginning of the interview, where I haven't seen it like this my entire time on the planet, where we are at this point. I know what we went through in the 70s. I was a kid during the 70s. I remember a little bit of the late 60s. The 80s, certainly I remember 90s, so forth and so on. But to this point, I had never seen the way it is now in terms of, like you said, pessimism taking a deep hold. But I guess the point of the book and what we're having this conversation about is it doesn't have to stay this way.
Oh, no, it doesn't have to stay this way. We can empower ourselves as individuals to do our part, to be more positive, right, and be more tolerant, like I've said. And by the way, a lot of your listeners out there right now are those people already. They're
correct.
Good people. They're tolerant already. They're kind already, And so this book will probably be an affirmation, if you will, of the way they already act in the world, and that's important. But, again, yes, I mean, we're in the same age group, and I have never seen it like this ever before myself. It is pretty much everywhere you look, unfortunately.
Correct.
You see this negative energy, and of course, they once again come back to the media. They hype up any little thing that's going wrong. They hype it up and they make it seem like it's a freaking disaster.
Correct.
One of my favorite things is I look real quickly at the stock market in the morning, and if the stock market goes up a little bit, they show a guy on the trading floor in New York on Wall Street with a big smile on his face, right? Well, how about this? When it goes down 10 points, they'll have this guy look like he just lost his best friend. It's like, and I'm thinking, really? If that's not a manipulation and a visual to go along with something to make people anxious because it lost 10 freaking points. Come on. Yeah. And I love your line. Does that make sense to you? That guy looks so lost. Man, if he's lost a 10-point drop, that guy needs to get off the floor. Just saying.
It's true. It really is. But then I think for me, I guess the sad, also fascinating part is, and again, it could be for a variety of reasons, it's just so easily that we're manipulated. That's where going back to the critical thinking thing you were talking about a little bit earlier. Like, it seems that I could be totally wrong on my observation, but it seems like we're so easily manipulated. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just repetition that does it. But I could not agree with you more in terms of just seems like a lot of manipulation going on.
There is. It's the reason people can be easily manipulated is through repetitive imaging, right? You just hear the same message over and over and over again, right? It's almost like brainwashing, frankly. And it's like I said earlier in the interview, it's fear-based. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to pay attention to this because it's going to affect my life and it's going to be horrible. It's going to be terrible. Oh my God, what can we do to fix this? And then, of course, without getting in that political, whirlpool, right? And some other manipulation takes place on some other area to make it look like, oh, see, aren't we doing so much better now? And it's like the guy who does magic tricks. It's called, what do? They make sure you look over here when you're really doing something over there.
Correct.
And there's a lot of that going on. You have to be astute enough to be aware of it. Like, oh, they're making this disaster over here. Oh, but wait a second, let's manipulate this over there so they'll feel like the population will feel like, oh, we're doing good. We're doing good over here. It's like bait and switch. It's really funny how it works.
It absolutely is. And at the end of the day, and I'm not going to go down the political whirlpool either, both parties have their good, both parties have their bad. Both the ideologies, I mean, so like again, you kind of like, okay, you take the best of each and try to make it happen. I mean, in some respects, it's almost like they're both just as bad. I mean, just the fact that like we're still into that whole party system is an issue. That's another discussion all in and of itself. True. But at some point, you really can't even tell too much of a difference either way. But like you just said, you can manipulate it to make it look as if it is one way or the other. But we like,
you surely can.
Right. But like I said, you just take this hardcore stance that's just like, okay, I can either way. I mean, I may not like one way or the other, but I can honestly see where, and matter of fact, in some instances, I can see where I'm a little bit of both. Because on some issues, I sit there, I kind of tease people and say I'm kind of like a conservative. Or either a liver serve, whichever one. Like, why do we have labels to begin with? That's the other thing.
Right.
But it's kind of like, I can understand the positions.
Absolutely. You know, again, it all comes back to tolerance. It all comes back to, listen, I can understand your point of view as best I can.
Right.
I don't agree with it, and I have my reasons not to agree with it, but I can definitely understand where you're coming from. So it comes down to what we always keep saying, you know, it comes down to kindness and being appreciative of another person's position and their background. And you know what else? People are like books with covers, right? We don't know their backstory.
Right.
We don't know what they've been through. We don't know their experience. We don't know how they ended up with this kind of personality or attitude.
Right.
We don't know their backstory usually sufficiently enough to really know that person in the kind of depth that would make us understand why they feel or think a certain way, right?
Correct.
We're not this, you know, we're very similar in many ways, but we're also very different.
Correct.
It's the paradox of life, you know.
You're absolutely right. Well, Dr. Adams, we are down to the last few minutes of the interview, and this is what I always do with that. You have the opportunity to promote all that you would like. The only thing you can't say is a dollar amount. With the exception of a dollar amount, anything else short of that, I'm going to turn the mic button off, and you have the opportunity to promote all your works, how folks can get in touch with you, your websites, the books. And like I said, I will be downloading the other two that we talked about now, because you've really piqued my curiosity there with both of those. With God Shrink and Affairs of the Net. Those two for sure. We didn't even talk about Anniversary, a Love Story button. So if we talk about that, I may wind up downloading that too. But God Shrink and Affairs of the Net, anything that you want to promote, you have the opportunity. Of course, we've been talking about America, Make America Sane Again. But again, this is your opportunity to promote. I'm going to shut up and turn off the mic, and it is yours.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate being on the show to begin with, Mark. So I want to start with that. You're a great host. It was a great interview and a nice conversational piece. As far as promoting myself or my book, what I'd like to say is this book, Make America Sane Again, has been well received by everybody so far. Everybody loves it because it gets to the point. And if you have common sense, I think you'll really appreciate it. You can get the book through Amazon, either a digital copy or a hard copy. And you can also go to my website, which is one word, makeamericasaneagain.net. And where if you go there, too, you'll see a clip. Actually, I wrote the screenplay for God Shrink, and that is in development. And you'll see a small trailer for that movie, which we're hoping is going to be made at some point. It's been a long haul. But beyond that, I want to wish all the listeners a great day and a great weekend. And, again, God bless you all, and thank you for having me on this show, Mark. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for rising early with me this morning, Dr. Adams. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation myself. Like I said, before today's over, I will have downloaded God Shrink and Affairs of the Net. I will have downloaded those on my iPad, on my Kindle, because like I said, you whet my appetite, piqued my curiosity there, just from the little summaries that you gave of each. And listening audience, you know how we do. You know, that's the whole purpose for the show. One is to increase your love for reading. For those of you who don't like to read, hopefully we pique your interest and you will want to read more. The show's been on the air now. I'm in my 22nd season, and that was the impetus for the show, is to help people to really understand the value and the importance of reading. And then you learn so much from doing that. Back to what Michael and I were saying in terms of just kind of like some common sense. I tell you what, I challenge those of you out there, you know, get the books, turn off the news. In the time that you would be watching the news every day, pick up Make America Sane Again. and read a chapter or two in that. And at the same time that you might sit there and watch the same story, repeat it over and over again, pick up the book, Make America Sane Again. As Dr. Adams said, I got mine digitally. It's in my iPad, on my Kindle. You can order it. You can get a hard copy of it. You can get the digital copy. But again, and it's not written in PhDs. It is written, I mean, this is why I brought that point up earlier. Because a lot of times, when you get directions for things, when you have to put things